Hi, welcome to Reading Structure, Paper 1, Question 3. Today we're going to use the first 4 paragraphs of the book 1984 by George Orwell. And as you may notice here, we've got some nice oxymorons. War is peace, freedom is slavery, which I thought I'd introduce just as a bit of revision. And this is a collection of various oxymorons which are contradiction in terms such as civil war, lost discoveries, restored ruins. So you can stop the video and have a look at those at your leisure to see and think about why those are oxymorons. This is the procedure for in-class lessons on Thursday. You can stop the video to read those in detail. So this week we are going to look at how writers use structure to achieve their effects, to understand some of the basic ways writers use structure and sequence their work, develop knowledge of subject terminology, recognise how structural features are used to make a particular impression on you, and practice a structure question. So we're focusing on 1984, and the title of the work was Paper 1, Question 3, Structure 1984. The date today is the 9th of November 2020. We briefly mentioned the concepts of Big Brother and Room 101, which have both become television series, and the fact that those concepts both originated in the novel 1984. So this is the structure of question 3. You need now to think about the whole of the source. The text is from the start of a novel. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? You could write about what the writer does to create an atmosphere at the beginning of the text, how and why the writer changes the focus, any other structural features that interest you. And it's 8 marks, so you would be expected to write about 2 good paragraphs on that. So we looked at 4 structural features to start with. What the writer focuses on, whether there's any foreshadowing, so whether something is predicted by introducing images or ideas earlier on, zooming in and out, so changing focus from detail to the wider picture, and also juxtaposing, which is placing contrasting ideas next to each other. All of these concepts appear in this 1984 extract, and we have some terminology on the right-hand side here. Okay, so that those are some things that you could say when you're writing your answer. When you answer the question, ask yourself, how has the author introduced me to this world? And your answer should explain the route the author takes to lead you through the events. And don't just retell the story, because your answer should focus on how the writer structures the writing rather than what happens. So this is the opening sentence of 1984. It was a bright cold day in April and the clocks were striking 13. So the opening sentence of any text is very important because it leads immediately to capture the interest of the reader. It needs to have an impact. So we discussed the effect of these 2 clauses. So the first one is very normal, the second one is very peculiar, because clocks, certainly in 1948 when this was written, do not strike 13. An analog clock won't strike 13 or show at 13 even today. At that point, people were not using digital clocks. And we talked about why the reader created a contrast and concluded that it's to introduce this strange world that we're going to meet and to get you engaged so you read further on. So we read this prepared answer. The first clause encourages the reader to believe that it's going to be an ordinary day. However, the second clause in the sentence juxtaposes, puts near to, but with the clock striking 13, because we know that the clocks only go up to 12, it creates intrigue in the reader. The number 13 connotes negativity, as it's seen as a bad omen, which could foreshadow that there's something not quite right, and the puzzling hook engages the reader, so they want to find out what strange things are happening in this world. This is the full first paragraph. It was a bright cold day in April and the clocks were striking 13. Winston Smith, his chin nuddled into his breast in an effort to escape the vile wind, slipped quickly through the glass doors of Victory Mansions, though not quickly enough to prevent the swirl of gritty dust from entering along with him. So the writer is focused on Winston Smith, who is the protagonist of the story. And the paragraph is quite short, but it does include references to vile wind and gritty dust. So in addition to this clock striking 13, we have adjectives like vile and gritty, which means that there's something unpleasant in this place. Something's not right. The second paragraph. The hallway smelt of old boiled cabbages and old rag mats. At one end of it, a coloured poster too large for indoor display had been tacked to the wall. It depicted simply an enormous face, more than a metre wide, the face of a man of about 45, with a heavy black moustache and ruggedly handsome features. Winston made for the stairs. It was no use trying the lift. Even at the best of times it was seldom working, and at present the electric current was cut off during daylight hours. It was part of the economy drive in preparation for Hate Week. The flat was 7 flights up, and Winston, who was 39, had a varicose ulcer above his right ankle, went slowly, resting several times on the way. On each landing opposite the lift shaft, the poster with the enormous face gazed from the wall. It was one of those pictures which are so contrived that the eyes follow you about when you move. Big Brother is watching you, the caption beneath it ran. So you can see that the hallway smelt of boiled cabbage, and later on we find out that the lift doesn't work, the electricity is off, not to mention Hate Week, which is very peculiar. And we hear about these enormous and intimidating posters which are mentioned twice in this paragraph. Why does the reader do this? Well, he's focusing you on the state of the flats, which isn't very good, but then the impression that there's some very intimidating posters in the flats. So we might think, that's a bit of a contrast. What's happening here? So the writer focuses on the inside of the building, the poster, and Winston himself in this paragraph. The flats aren't well looked after. Winston is a bit weak and ill. We hear about his ulcer, and there are intimidating posters on every floor. We can infer that the government cares a lot about monitoring people, but not much about their welfare. This is the third paragraph. Inside the flat, a fruity voice was reading out a list of figures which had something to do with the production of pig iron. The voice came from an oblong metal plaque, like a dialed mirror, which formed part of the surface of the right-hand wall. Winston turned a switch and the voice sank somewhat, though the words were still distinguishable. The instrument, the telescreen it was called, could be dimmed, but there was no way of shutting it off completely. He moved over to the window, a smallish, frail figure, the meagreness of his body merely emphasised by the blue overalls which were the uniform of the party. His hair was very fair, his face naturally sanguine, his skin roughened by coarse soap and blunt razor grades, and the cold winter that had just ended. So once again we have a contrast of, in the second part here without the lines, Winston's weakness with the power of the state. So the state is using propaganda which contrasts with the weakness of Winston. The state invades people's homes with their propaganda and they're very strong. So once again it's the juxtaposition of strength and weakness. This is the last paragraph. Outside, even through the shut window pane, the world looked cold. Down in the street, little eddies of wind were whirling dust and torn paper into spirals, and though the sun was shining and the sky a harsh blue, there seemed to be no colour in anything except the posters that were plastered everywhere. The black mustachioed face gazed down from every commanding corner. There was one on the house front immediately opposite. Big Brother is watching you, the caption said, while the dark eyes looked deep into Winston's own. Down at street level, another poster, torn at one corner, flapped fitfully in the wind, alternately covering and uncovering the single word, Ingsoc. In the far distance, a helicopter skimmed down between the roofs, hovered for an instant like a blue bottle, and darted away again with a curving flight. It was the police patrol, snooping into people's windows. The patrols did not matter, however. Only the thought police mattered. So the focus shifts here back out to outside, as we started at the beginning. So there's a sort of a circular structure here. So the window is a view to the outside world, but unfortunately the state is looking in, so the inside world doesn't actually produce any privacy for the person inside. So the writer focuses on the inside of the building, the poster, on Winston himself, and then here we've moved on to the inside of the flat. And then we move to outside, looking out of the window. The outside environment is cold and harsh. There are intimidating posters on every corner. Police are snooping into everyone's windows. But worst of all, even worse than all of that, and the police are described as blue bottles, so they're like irritating flies. But what's worse is the thought police. And that hook would grab you and take you through to the next part of the story, which is not included in this extract, and that would be one way of engaging the reader and keeping you interested. We can infer that the government cares a lot about monitoring people, as we've seen, but not much about their welfare. But the thought police are the real ones to be feared. So it's possible to write 2 paragraphs about this very easily. There's a choice of at least 4 things. The changes in focus to take you on a journey into this world. The foreshadowing, predicting that something will happen by introducing very weird things at the beginning, like the unpleasantness in the entrance hall, in the entrance door, and also the clock striking 13 and the posters everywhere. It's all very strange. The writer focuses and zooms in and out, changing from the wider environment to Winston and then back out again to the outside environment. And he juxtaposes the ideas of strength and weakness next to each other to show that the society is controlled by a strong government that interferes in people's lives.